Good morning. Welcome to Old Ship, First Parish Unitarian Universalist Church of Hingham. All are welcome here. I'm Dennis Hogan, member of the Board of Trustees. We gather here today to support the open search for meaning, to honor the interconnected web of existence, and to nourish the spirit. We're mindful that we're gathering on the ancestral land of the Massachusetts people, for whom this land is sacred. If you would like to get to know us better, please join us after the service for coffee and conversation at 14 Main Street, our parish house. The entrance is on the North Street side of the building. Please note that you will find this week's schedule of events in your order of worship. And please keep in mind that we are glad you are with us today. Our morning service will now begin.
We've had a couple of services based loosely on the idea of freedom, and it brought to my mind this old Appalachian song that I want to share with you. I'm as free little bird as I can be. I'm as free little bird as I can be. I'm gonna build my house in that weep willow tree where them bad boys cannot bother me. I won't build my nest in the air. No, I won't build my nest in the air. I will build my nest in my sweet darling's breast, fly all around in her hair. I'm as free little bird as I can be. I'm as free little bird as I can be. Think about that. I'm as free little bird as I can be. Some philosophical depth to that. I'm gonna build my house in that weeping willow tree where them bad boys cannot bother me. I would never steal the honey from a bee. I would never steal the honey from a bee. But I would steal a kiss from my sweet darling's lips, sail away far across the sea. I'm as free little bird as I can be. I'm as free little bird as I can be. Gonna build my house in that weeping willow tree when them bad boys cannot bother me. Now we have the lighting of the chalice.
I'm Christopher Sullivan, he, him. And this is a reading from, or a quote from Benjamin Franklin. When a religion is good, I conceive it will support itself. And when it does not support itself, and God does not take care to support it, so that its professors are obliged to call for help of the civil power, 'tis a sign, I apprehend, of its being a bad one.
Our opening hymn is number 113, Where is Our Holy Church?
I'm Joan Wilson, a member of the Pastoral Care Leadership Team, and it's often been said that a joy shared is a joy doubled, and a sorrow shared is a sorrow halved. At this time, if you're moved to do so, you're invited to share a joy, sorrow, or concern. Please wait for Josiah to bring you the microphone. Raise your hand and begin with your name, and then briefly state your joy, sorrow, or concern. Derek.
Good morning, I'm Derek, as everybody knows. My constant calls for peace in the Middle East couldn't be more true today than they've ever been. So here's a candle for peace in the Middle East. We mustn't forget Ukraine, which a lot of people are. And just as importantly, peace at home here. I can see we could be in a war of our own if we're not careful.
Thank you. Corey in the back.
Corey Sheher. I just want 2 candles, one for joy and gratitude of all the people, and you know who you are, that are behind the scenes every week and during the week to make this service and this congregation possible and thriving. And also a candle of concern and hope for those people that aren't sheltered, don't have food in their tummy, and whether they are or not, don't feel loved and appreciated today.
Thank you.
Judy Flaherty, just a candle in celebration of my Michael's life. Today's his birthday.
Thank you. Over here to Mary Thomas, please.
a candle of thanks to the committee or the individual, the social justice committee that decided that we should read Climate Change is Racist. It is a bombshell, and it's within the framework of 500 years. It's as if atoms have been flowing, the atoms of colonization, the atom of industrialization, all put together, discovery, the doctrine of discovery, all put together in creating a bombshell of an understanding. Thank you, committee or individual.
Thank you, Mary. Right there, Roy.
A brief candle of joy for banjo-playing ministers. Amen.
Thanks, Roy. And Edmund. Diane Elliott over there.
Hi, Diane Elliott. I would like to light a candle of celebration and welcome to Elaine and Joe Cusker over there in the corner. You guys could stand up and wave. These are longtime members from long ago, and they moved, and now they're back at Linden Pond and with us. So, yay.
Colin.
From Zoom, we have a candle from Daveline Cooper, a candle of joy for her cousin Matt and his wife Carly, who were married last week.
Do you have a mic?
A virtual candle, since we've run out of candles, for all those who've been participating in the very Minister to Work brigade. We hope to get this regularized to a real schedule, but some people have been giving me rides back and forth to Quincy, and I certainly appreciate it. It gives me a chance to visit with some great parishioners.
Thank you. These candles burn us well for any joys, sorrows, or concerns deeply felt, though unspoken, among us this morning.
Let us sit in silence for a moment, and then I will close off our meditation with a short prayer. God, lover of us all, most holy one, help us to respond to you, to create what you want for us here on earth. Give us today enough for our needs. Forgive our weak and deliberate offenses, just as we must forgive others when they hurt us. Help us to resist evil and to do what is good, for we are yours, endowed with your power to make our world whole. Amen.
This reading is in two parts. One, West Virginia Board of Education versus Barnett. This is in 1943, holding that it violates the First Amendment for a school system to require a Jehovah's Witness to recite the Pledge of Allegiance when that is against the students' religious principles. Justice Jackson wrote for the court, "If there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by any word or act their faith therein. If there are any circumstances which permit an exception, they do not now occur to us." Number two, this is from Unitarian Universalism, A Narrative History by David Brumbaugh. After describing many areas of tension between the Unitarians of the 1820s and the more orthodox Congregationalists. Seeking yet another weak point for attack, the Orthodox now charge that Unitarians, while a minority in the state, had managed by dubious means to obtain control of the political structures of the state. Once more, it was William Ellery Channing who responded in behalf of the Unitarians. Eventually, this controversy would result in amending the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 1834 to provide for the separation of church and state and the final disestablishment of religion. Unitarians who opposed this action were identified as anti-disestablishmentarians. A variety of religious groups, including the Universalists, combined their efforts and succeeded in ending tax support for all churches. Many evangelical churches obviously preferred to lose public money rather than share it with the Unitarians.
Let us now receive the offering of your money going to this particular Unitarian Universalist church. Anti-disestablishmentarianism made easy. Last week, we talked about how our two constituent denominations, Unitarianism and Universalism, came together despite some differences in philosophy, for the Unitarians believed in free will, while the Universalists were determinists. We can represent this graphically in the logo for our combined denominations. If you look on your outside of your hymnal, either hymnal, Unitarian Universalism with the two circles which didn't quite fit together. Each was slightly off center to the other, and they created crescents on either side, and we explored what those crescents might mean. Today, I invite you to reflect on another way in which Unitarians and Universalists were on opposite sides of an issue. But this one was in our common history, not in philosophy or theology. It had to do with a very long word. Now, I admit to a lifelong love affair with words. I know there are realities which cannot be expressed in words, and have respect for the limitations of language, both as a former lawyer and as a minister. But I have been a lover of words. I've always been fascinated by words that sound like other words, like through and thorough, or just have a cool sound of their own, like nuance, or susurration, or bedecked, or bespoke. In junior high, I was known as a word nerd. I freely admit it. Yes, I'm guilty. And I went through a phase where I was enamored of big, long words and would show them off at every opportunity, just like Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke did in Mary Poppins. But for a couple of years, the longest word I knew was not supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It was anti-disestablishmentarian. Back then, I didn't have a clue as to what it meant. Of course, but now I've been to divinity school and have taught the history of liberal religion at UU churches for a couple of decades. And I think it's kind of neat to tie the history back into this very overstuffed word. It was hot in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and there are ghosts of it still around today. So it's worth a backward glance at that little bit of history, because it might help orient where we might want our faith to be going within the larger map of the community, state, and nation. Let's start by taking a scalpel to the word, trimming away most of the prefixes and suffixes to get to the heart of the word. We can take out anti, which is some sort of negation, dis, which is another kind of negation. So we have a double negative right at the beginning. Then you have a verb, establish, which is the heart of the word. Following the verb, you have the suffix ment, which changes the verb into a noun, and round it off with the suffix arians, which means the people who are part of the group described by the rest of the parts of the word. So the heart of this word is to establish. What is being established? Some might say a religion, some might say a government, some might say a way of life. After the American Revolution, the new citizens of the United States had a lot on their mind about their churches. When they were drafting their Bill of Rights, they got what many considered the most important subject, God, out of the way first. In the very First Amendment, they wrote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. These two clauses are known ever after as the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. They regulate two different things. And since we're talking about establishment here, we won't spend too much time this morning on free exercise. In thinking about the First Amendment in the Establishment Clause, don't overlook that crucial word, respecting. The framers could have been much more ambiguous about what relationship they wanted the Congress to have with any religious establishment. They really said Congress shouldn't get anywhere near an establishment. Don't even touch the subject. Don't put a subject heading on your bill. Now, it was fairly easy for the first Congresses to obey the Establishment Clause, for there never was any established church at the national level. There were plenty at the colonial level, but the First Amendment speaks only to the National Congress. Let me digress a moment to tell you about the one big Establishment Clause case I had when I was a volunteer attorney for the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. One day, Herb Silverman, a math professor at the College of Charleston, walked into my office and says he was an atheist, but the Constitution of South Carolina said he couldn't be governor unless he believed in God. I looked it up, and sure enough, there was a provision in the state constitution that said that no religious test would be required to hold public office except, the big except, that no one could hold any of certain specified offices if that person, quote, denied the existence of a supreme being, unquote. I said, Herb, you mean you don't believe in Diana Ross? Well, he was quite serious about it, as I quickly became, and we promptly set about running him for governor to set up a court test of the provision. The U.S. Supreme Court had decided a very similar case in the early 1960s, so I thought the state would simply fold, but they fought us vigorously on it. 6 years later, we finally got a decision holding that that provision of the South Carolina Constitution was unconstitutional. How about that? An unconstitutional constitution. As a violation of the Establishment Clause of the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment. By that time, I was well into my ministerial studies, but I took great pride in clearing the way for Herb Silverman to be the first self-proclaimed atheist to be elected to public office in South Carolina. We didn't put him in the governor's office exactly, but we did secure him a commission as a notary public, a few ranks down from governor. And as a bonus, the first lower court judge who ruled in his favor became one of the most faithful, active members of the Unitarian Church in Charleston. What is an established church? There's no exact definition because the fact patterns are so varied, but there's been a spate of recent scholarship on disestablishment of established churches, and the editors of the proposal came up with a list of 5 features that their researchers could look to consider whether it was an established church. 1, government financial support for a church, probably the main one, the big one. 2, government control over the, quote, creeds, order of worship, polity, and clerical appointment of state churches and related matters. So government control of the inner workings of the church. 3, laws requiring mandatory church attendance. There were plenty of these all over the place. Prohibiting services by non-established churches or requiring their licensure. 4, the use of the church to record births, deaths, and baptisms and marriages. And 5, the existence of religious tests to hold public office. And that would get us back to Mr. Silverman. By the way, the next to the last one is again active around here. We do keep a registry of births, deaths, and marriages. It started by, it started before Ken, but Ken has kept it up faithfully and got me to agree to keep it up faithfully at Old Ship. I don't think it violates the Establishment Clause, though. All of these features were to some extent present in Massachusetts churches of the early part of the 19th century. But the first question many have about disestablishing churches was, why should there be any issue that we care about today? The United States Bill of Rights was ratified in 1791, and the First Amendment clearly prohibits the government from running churches or Congress from even making any laws regarding the establishment of religion, and that argument is correct as far as it goes. But the Bill of Rights, as it was written only, is a restraint on the powers of the federal government. It says nothing explicitly about the powers of the state and local governments. Moreover, as I pointed out a minute ago, there never was in U.S. history an official national established church. So it's pretty easy for the Bill of Rights to outlaw something that never existed. But on the state level, you had by the time the American Revolution was settled, established churches in most of the states. In most of the southern ones, it was the Episcopal or Anglican Church. In New England, it was Congregational churches, the descendants of the Puritans. Pennsylvania and Rhode Island never had established churches because the tradition of religious toleration was so long and deep in those states. Think of the context in which European settlers came to the New World in the 17th and 18th centuries. The 30 Years' War, one of the most brutal in European history, was basically over religious freedom, and 8 million people were killed in it. It is not surprising that many who came to America were skeptical of any marriage of state and church power. If you were a settler in Massachusetts in the 1620s or after, you would soon learn that you could not charter a town until you made provisions for a church. You had to have 10 settlers who would tithe, that is, give up 1/10 of their assets and pool their money and buy and dedicate a piece of ground for a meeting house and then proceed to build one. After they had the land and the building, they could try to find a learned minister to be their teacher. Only when the town had the minister and the meeting house and the building could the town fathers make application to the Great and General Court for recognition as a town. In this way, each town in Massachusetts didn't just acquire a church, it was built around a church. There were layers of membership, the church and the parish. The church was a small group of the people who passed the religious test which allowed them to partake of Holy Communion. It included women. The other significant group was the parish. This was more of a secular administration than the church, and it consisted of all qualified, i.e. male, voters within the town limits. In the period 1820 to 1830, churches often split when it came time to get a new minister, with the parish often voting to call a liberal Unitarian and the more conservative church members voting to call an Orthodox Congregationalist minister. Such a conflict came up to the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts from the town of Dedham, and the court ruled in favor of the liberals. The Orthodox withdrew from the church and built their own across the street. You will find this actually replicated on many town greens in Massachusetts today. You will have a church that's called First Parish, which is now Unitarian Universalist. And across the street, you'll have something called the Trinitarian Congregational Church when the liberals won the battle. The system of sound churches is called the Standing Order. During the period 1820, there was a theological dispute, as we've just covered, within the churches of the Standing Order, which historians call the Unitarian controversy. But at the same time, there was rising popular dissatisfaction with the whole idea of tax-supported churches. What about those churches outside the Standing Order? As the American Revolution was being fought, the Baptists, Methodists, Anglicans, Quakers, and the Roman Catholics, not to mention Jews, Muslims, and non-theists, were increasingly dissatisfied with having to pay some of their taxes to support the Congregational or Unitarian pastor, as well as their own clergy. There was an irony. They were fighting the British for imposing taxes without representation, but in church, these non-standing order church people were having to pay for ministers they didn't vote for and who weren't preaching the religion they belonged to. A recent study says this, quote, during the 18th century, colonial courts had carved out exceptions for some religious dissenters, allowing them to direct their tithes to support their own ministers and churches. Such dissenters, however, were required to register each church as a separate religious society and to prove their attendance at the same. Not all dissenting churches were able or willing to meet the registration requirements, and not all townships cooperated in granting the registration or tithe exemptions. If the dissenting church was too small to have its own full-time minister, the township denied them registration. If the dissenting church was conscientiously opposed to incorporation or registration, as were Baptists after 1773, their members were not exempt from taxation. You long-term old shippers are used to the idea, but I'm still just gobsmacked over the amount of history in this corner of the Commonwealth. Just as we have the longest standing meeting house in North America dedicated continuously to public worship, we also have a neighbor just up the street who drafted most of the longest serving Constitution in the world, John Adams. Most of his Constitution of 1780 is still in force. He didn't even finish his work on it. He had to turn the draft over to others so he could get to France to represent the new government. The draft had very grand things to say about freedom to worship as one's conscience dictates. But religious worship was not only a right, but a duty. While one could worship in the, quote, manner and season most agreeable to the dictates of his own conscience, unquote, such worship was to be directed to the Supreme Being, the great creator and preserver of the universe, leaving the non-theists unprotected, to put it mildly. These are what today we would call free exercise issues. But the most controversial part of the draft was the continuation of the system of religious establishment, which had been in place. This is now we're talking about the 1780 Constitution written while the Revolutionary War is still going on. So it continued the governmental supported churches. The study noted, although it notably acknowledged the equality of diverse religious groups before the law, the final draft of Article 3 largely retained the traditional tithing system and jettisoned some of the hard-fought concessions that Baptists, Anglicans, and other dissenters had secured through litigation. As Samuel Eliot Morison, the famous historian, wrote, quote, Article 3 was even less liberal than the colonial system, for instead of exempting members of dissenting sects from religious taxation, it merely gave them the privilege of paying their taxes to their own pastors. Unbelievers, non-churchgoers, and dissenting minorities too small to maintain a minister had to contribute to congregational worship with a capital C. The whole article was so loosely worded as to defeat the purpose of the fifth paragraph, guaranteeing the equality of all sects and denominations. Every new denomination that entered the Commonwealth, notably the Universalists and the Methodists, had to wage a long and expensive lawsuit to obtain recognition as a religious sect. A subordination of sects existed. In fact, and when I'm saying sects, I'm saying sects with a T. This is what I was talking about in the beginning of this sermon, another instance of Unitarians and Universalists being on opposite sides of an issue. The hard work of John Adams and his colleagues paid off, and the Constitution of 1780 was ratified barely. But Article 3 was a continuing sore spot for any churches outside the standing order. After all the controversy, the Constitution maintained an establishment of religion. It wasn't until 1833 that the state religion of Massachusetts was officially disestablished, making it the last state in the Union to have publicly supported churches or ministers. It added an 11th Amendment, which declared that the religious societies of the Commonwealth, quote, whether corporate or incorporate, at any meeting duly warned and holden for that purpose, shall ever have the right to elect their pastors or religious teachers, to contract with them for their support, to raise money for erecting and repairing houses of worship, for the maintenance of religious instruction, and for the payment of necessary expenses. Now, let me stop right there. That's actually putting congregational polity into the state constitution. What's that going to do to the hierarchical churches like Roman Catholicism, like Anglicanism, like Methodism, that have bishops. The power proceeds down from bishops. This says every congregation can elect their own pastors. So I would like to know what sort of litigation hit the mill when that went into effect. This amendment must thus made church membership and funding entirely voluntary. It granted all religious societies, Christian or not, incorporated or not, the right to hire their own clergy, to build their own churches, and to manage their own membership rolls. It promised equal protection of the law to believers of all sects and non-believers alike, and it ensured that individual members of those sects could exit without incurring liability for contracts subsequently made by the other members of that sect. What does any of us mean for us today? Our forebears in this church were the beneficiaries of a privileged position just because their forebears got here early. They didn't earn the right to be in the standing order, and yet for years the public Baptists and Methodists and Lutherans had to pay taxes to support ministers here at First Parish. A more significant issue is what happened to the religion clauses today. Jack Gomez read a passage from the seminal case of West Virginia versus Barnett. That's the Establishment Clause in its most expansive. Last year in First Church in Boston, I was privileged to host a talk by Ellery Shemp, a resident of Medford, who, when he was in high school, sued to get the school to stop Bible readings at the beginning of each day. It went up to the Warren Court and they won. Those were the days for liberalism in the Warren Court and the Burger Court. What is happening now with the Roberts Court is the free exercise clause is being expanded and the Establishment Clause shrunk in equal measure. A typical example is Hobby Lobby versus Burwell in 2014, where the court ruled 5-4 that the religious rights of a for-profit corporation were violated by a mandate from the state that they make birth control available to their employees as part of the employment benefits package, as all other employees in the state were getting. Before that decision, I would have said that corporations other than religious societies don't have religious rights under the First Amendment free exercise clause. They don't exercise. You don't see the corporation walking into a church. You don't see it having any religious business at all. They're not people. Whereas the employee's right to birth control under her healthcare policy was just shoved aside. In closing, I'd like to give you just a little taste of John Adams's writing. I happen to be a great fan of his. Here's the preamble to the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. The end of the institution, maintenance, and administration. The end of the institution, maintenance, and administration of government is to secure the existence of the body politic, to protect it, and to furnish the individuals who compose it with the power of enjoying in safety and tranquility their natural rights and the blessings of life. And whenever these great objects are not obtained, the people have a right to alter the government and to take measures necessary for their safety, prosperity, and happiness. The body politic is formed by a voluntary association of individuals. It is a social compact by which the whole people covenants with each citizen and each citizen with the whole people, that all shall be governed by certain laws for the common good. It is the duty of the people, therefore, in framing a constitution of government, to provide for an equitable mode of making laws, as well as for an impartial interpretation and a faithful execution of them, that every man may at all times find the security in them. One more paragraph. We, therefore, the people of Massachusetts, acknowledging with grateful hearts the goodness of the great legislator of the universe, in affording us in the course of his providence an opportunity deliberately and peaceably, without fraud, violence, or surprise, of entering into an original, explicit, and solemn compact with each other, and of forming a new constitution of civil government for ourselves and posterity, and devoutly imploring his direction in so interesting a design, do agree upon, ordain, and establish the following Declaration of Rights and frame of government as the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Something maybe to chew over in this election year. And as this establishmentarians unite. Amen. Our closing hymn is number 104, When Israel Was in Egypt's Land. Please join me in extinguishing the chalice with the words of the holy service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of the community and the fire of the Spirit. These we carry in our hearts until we are together. Go out in joy and be led back in peace. The mountains and the hills before you shall burst into song, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Amen. Blessed be. Go in peace.